isn't free, but I still believe in my freedom, so my light can see.
All right, good afternoon again, America. So, you can see here we got Camp Finicum going, and we just got done talking with the FBI, and they said they're going to press more charges on me, David Fry, and Jeff, because we are fortifying, and they consider fortifying a crime.
A stand means you're willing to risk your life.
David, it is harder to live for liberty than it is to die for it. Don't be a coward like that. Be like Ammon and actually live for it.
You have no right to call me a coward. Don't call me a coward. If everybody says hallelujah, I'll come out. Huh? Will you? Will you do that? Everybody's listening. I'm walking towards them right now.
Okay, stay fine.
I'm walking towards you, David. Keep walking, my friend. Hallelujah. All right, folks. Everybody come on.
All right, good job, David.
Good job.
This is Jake Morphonios with the Citizens for Constitutional Freedom. Several weeks ago, I first heard the name David Fry. I had been doing some research on Ammon, Bundy, and the Citizens for Constitutional Freedom when I learned that the 27-year-old from Ohio had traveled out to join others at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. I was intrigued. I asked myself the same question that is now on the minds of many other Americans. Who is this fearless millennial kid who's taking on the federal government, fighting to end the corruption? David is half American and half Japanese. On his paternal grandmother's side, his roots reach all the way back to the American Revolution. Major John Cessna served at Valley Forge with General George Washington. Major Cessna's daughter, Rachel, married Thomas Hemming, another patriot to have served with General Washington. Thomas and Rachel named their son Richard George Washington Hemming. And a heritage of patriotic service to America is also found on David's paternal grandfather's side. United States Marine Corps Sergeant Isaac N. Fry, who fought in the Civil War and received a Medal of Honor, is also purported to be one of David's ancestors. His maternal mother's side of the family were samurai in the area of Hofu City in Yamaguchi Prefecture, Japan. Bush Sadamitsu was the last of the samurai in his mother's family lineage, once the samurai class was eliminated during the Meiji Restoration period. One of David's great-uncles, Robert Leo Hemming, a United States Marine PFC, was killed in World War II at Saipan on July 24, 1944. David is surrounded by noble men who have done their duty to the United States of America, including his grandfather, a retired Marine major, his uncle, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant, and his father, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant, and his brother, a Marine staff sergeant, presently serving on active duty following his recent return from duty in Iraq. David's bloodline includes a long line of patriots and warriors. Standing for freedom is in his DNA. This heritage leaves him little choice but to fight for what is right. His name was chosen by his father as both a biblical and American heroic namesake. While David of the Bible fought the dreaded Goliath, David Fry fights against a Goliath of his own, the federal government. Fortunately, David's presence at the wildlife refuge did not end as Davy Crockett's did at the Alamo. Instead, David was able to walk out bravely, with his head held high, knowing that he was the last man standing against the federal government at the refuge. As David prepared himself to depart and fearlessly submit himself to federal agents, he wondered aloud why more Americans, who see the great problems facing our country, are not taking a principled stand against tyranny. With the grip of the federal government continuing to tighten around the throats of American citizens, I can't help but echo David's query. America, where are you? And when are you going to take a stand?
It has been 41 days, but the issues go back much further than that. Reporter Jennifer Wade completed a timeline. So, Jen, how did this all start?
Dan, the standoff gained momentum after rancher, father and son Dwight and Steve Hanman were convicted of arson on federal land. A judge imposed less than the minimum sentence, but that was overturned and they were ordered to go back to prison. This angered many, and in mid-December, militants gathered in Burns to protest the Hammons going back to jail.
The Harney County standoff unfolded with the start of the new year. Hundreds gathered in Burns to protest the re-imprisonment of the Hammonds, but a small group of armed protesters broke away and took over the Malheur National Refuge. The next day, leader Ammon Bundy explains the occupiers' stance to the media.
Making a hard stand against this overreach, this taking of the people's land and resources.
On day 3, the Hammonds returned to federal prison, while the Harney County Sheriff tells the occupiers to go home. Hundreds of Harney County residents agree with the sheriff and gather to voice their concerns. The sheriff and Ammon Bundy then meet face-to-face to discuss ending the refuge. Bundy stands his ground and refuses to leave. Days later, protesters tear down a portion of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife fence. Soon, the first occupier is arrested after authorities accuse him of driving a stolen government car to Burns. 2 weeks in, conservation groups in Bend and across Oregon rally for the standoff to end. Day 20, Ammon Bundy and the FBI begin negotiations, and Governor Brown urges a swift resolution.
If we lose and get driven out of here, and it does not go back to Harney County, but goes back to the federal government, that is a great blow to the 10th Amendment.
25 days in, OSP and FBI officers stop protest leaders headed to a community meeting in John Day. The stop results in the killing of LaVoy Finicum and the arrest of 5 occupiers, including leader Ammon Bundy. 6 others are also arrested elsewhere. And in Bend, St. Charles issues a precautionary lockdown overnight. The next day, Bundy goes to court and calls the last 4 occupiers to go home. But the 4 refuse to leave and post videos online as the FBI negotiates to end the occupation. A month into the standoff, and hundreds on both sides gather at the Harney County Courthouse to loudly urge protesters or the FBI to go home. Phone and internet service is cut off from the refuge, and the FBI provides occupiers with a phone believed to be their only source of communication. 40 days in, the FBI says it's time to bring things to an end and moves in on the 4 holding out. Which brings us to Thursday, 41 days in, and finally, the last 4 occupiers surrender. David Fry is the last to come out, and after much convincing from the FBI, a Nevada lawmaker, and Reverend Franklin Graham.
Unless my grievances are heard, I will not come out!
He eats a cookie and smokes a last cigarette, getting the FBI agents to shout hallelujah before being taken into custody.
It's the surreal end to a tense 41 days. Few in Harney County will ever forget the takeover, but with about 24 occupiers indicted and in court, the story is far from over. Dan, back to you.
Well, it's officially over. After 41 days, the final occupiers at a wildlife refuge in Oregon have all surrendered. It had been whittled down to just 4 holdouts for some time until last night. The FBI surrounded the refuge and negotiations began through the night and into this morning. And in the latest surrender, no one was injured, no shots were fired. In all, 20 people have been arrested. One man, Robert LaVoy Finicum, was killed by an agent about 2 weeks ago during a highway stop. Now, earlier, I spoke to RT's Simone Del Rosario, who's been on the ground in Oregon following this story since day one. And here's what she told us.
At first, I thought it would be uneventful, except for we had 4 holdouts, and one of the holdouts decided he wanted to hold out a little bit more. So 3 of the people surrendered pretty peacefully right away. Sean and Sandra Anderson of Idaho, Jeff Banta of Nevada, David Fry of Ohio. He said he was going to surrender, and then he held back, and it started this hours-long negotiation between him and the FBI that ended up being live streamed by an activist over YouTube. So there were tens of thousands of people listening to this live stream of this hours-long negotiation. I'm not going to lie, it did get a little strange. She started talking about a lot of different things, marijuana laws, Syria, abortion, taxes, a lot of different things going on there. He kept also saying things about liberty or death, as if those were his only options. And that's when I think people started to get a little bit concerned. He made some suicidal comments at one point, saying that he had a gun to his head. But at the end of it all, he surrendered peacefully. He said, "I need one more cookie and a cigarette," and walked out. And one of his stipulations was that he wanted the FBI agents to holler "Hallelujah" when he walked out. Take a listen.
You're saying hallelujah! So I'm walking towards them right now.
Okay, stay calm.
I'm walking towards you, David. Keep walking, my friend. Hallelujah. Slow down. Keep your hands up. Stop right there for a second before we turn around. All right.
You're all right, David.
Keep walking. All right. Down the foot. Nice and easy. Okay. Yep. Down. Right here. Just put your hand behind your back. Okay. All right. All right. All right, folks. Everybody come on.
All right, so that's how that live stream went. So you can tell that you could hear every single step. Now all 4 of those remaining holdouts are on their way to Portland. They're going to be arraigned tomorrow.
That certainly was kind of weird audio. Now, those 4, like you said, not only them, but in the past day, since last night, we found out that the Bundy patriarch, right, Cliven Bundy, has been arrested.
Such an interesting twist, Manila. So they had announced on their Facebook page that Cliven Bundy, the father of Ammon and Ryan Bundy, who are already in jail, that he was going to come out to the Militia National Wildlife Refuge, but he was stopped at the Portland International Airport by authorities and arrested. But his arrest has to do with his standoff from April of 2014, when he gathered a bunch of armed militiamen to face the federal government, who were trying to seize his cattle because he failed to pay his grazing fees. So his arrest from 2014, that they got him for conspiracy, assault of a federal officer, and obstruction, a number of charges. So nothing to do with the Militia standoff. It was such an interesting twist, though.
So they arrested him in Oregon for stuff that he did in Nevada.
Exactly.
Just so we're clear.
Exactly.
All right, so now this whole thing, this standoff is finally over, 41 days done, boom, everyone's gone. What's next?
So, you know, there's 16 people that have already been indicted. Another 4 on their way to Portland right now. They face federal felony count to impede officers. But I think what's next is that this town gets to breathe a really big sigh of relief. You know, rest in peace, LaVoy Finicum. But no one else had to die during this standoff. And so that itself is a positive. The FBI released a statement after they finished arresting these final 4. They said it is a time for healing, reconciliation amongst neighbors and friends, and allowing for work to get back to normal. So this town definitely has some healing to do. People were on opposite sides of this issue for some time. They were pitted against each other. So they get to move forward, and at least for a couple of days, the FBI is going to be treating the National Wildlife Refuge as a crime scene, looking to see if there's any other charges for the people that were occupied.
Our team coverage continues now on the Malheur Wildlife Refuge standoff. News Channel 21's Pedro Quintana went out and spoke to Central Oregon residents and got their reaction. He joins us in studio now with more. Pedro?
Dan, Prineville residents say they've been following the refuge occupations since day one. Some say they're happy it's finally over.
But yeah, but I don't know the name. They're having a family meeting.
It's the talk of the town, from the Prineville coffee time to the local burger joint.
I think they're breaking the law. I think we ought to run them out of there.
The refuge occupation in Harney County has affected everyone living in Central Oregon, especially Prineville, the scene of several rallies in recent weeks. One resident supporting the federal government and the work they were doing to de-escalate the situation.
They should be charged with government property. I think the government is doing a pretty good job with everything they are doing.
But another resident supporting ranchers over the federal government for taking too much federal land.
The feds own too much property and should sell some of it off to the public.
One resident born and raised in Burns says he's upset by how the occupation has divided the Harney County community. The last 4 occupiers surrendered just before noon as the federal investigation continues.
I really don't think they had a choice. I think it was life or death.
A life and death situation that was averted after the last occupier, David Fry, walked out with his hands up. For Joe Mangold, it was a no-brainer. Occupiers would face federal charges.
I think they were out of line doing what they did.
No matter who you speak with in Prineville, each one has an opinion on the refuge occupation.
But, you know, it's federal land. They broke the law. And, again, I thought the authorities really showed a lot of restraint. It was unfortunate one of them got killed, but that probably was inevitable.
The refuge standoff is over, but the divisions over what happened appear far from being healed. Now, residents also spoke out bringing the focus back to the Hammonds, who are currently back in federal prison on arson convictions. One told me they should be released because they already served their time.
So, in breaking news today, Blaine Cooper was arrested. And, Clive and Bundy also arrested last night. Update right now, though, with at 1:40. It is right now 2:28 p.m. on the West Coast in Hollywood, California. And the update came in just a few minutes ago with additional information from the newly unsealed indictment. Yes, and the update before that was the at 12:30 p.m. or 12:40 p.m. to include information about Cooper's jail booking and the charge against him, as well as his wife's postings on Facebook. And before that update, 9:28 a.m. to include more information about Cooper's whereabouts since leaving the refuge, as well as the arrests of others involved in the occupation. Now, Blaine Cooper, a member of the core group that took over the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge on January 2nd, was arrested Thursday in southwestern Utah. Now, he was booked in the jail in Washington County, Utah, which includes the city of St. George online jail records. Actually, that's what they show. The arresting agency of those records, it says the arresting agency was listed as the FBI that arrested Mr. Cooper, and an indictment was unsealed in federal court in Portland on Thursday. Cooper was charged with conspiracy to impede officers of the United States, the same charge that has been basically levied against at least 20 others involved in the 41-day sanctuary occupation. Maybe that's why a lot of people didn't show up there, because this was, a lot of people felt wrong about this thing. 2 sons. Now, Bundy was arrested late Wednesday night, which was late last night, at the Portland International Airport and faces federal charges related to the 2014 standoff at his ranch. He also attended Finicum's memorial last week also. Now, 6 others have been named in the indictment that named Cooper, and they are Corey Laquagi, 45, of Nevada, Neil Wampler, of 68 years old, of California, Jason Charles Blongren, also known as Joker J, and Daryl William Thorne, Wesley Kajar, and Eric Lee Flores. 2 names renamed, redacted Thursday afternoon. Let's see here. And Wampler was convicted in 1977 of second-degree murder in killing his father, Wampler, not this other guy, Wayne Cooper, Wampler. Wow. This is heavy stuff, folks.
This morning, News Channel 21 was closely monitoring the live streaming feed as events unfolded, and our Danny Freed was capturing that feed. So, Danny, can you give us some sort of timeline tonight?
Yeah, Dan, I can. The timeline begins as early as last night as blogger Gavin Symes began a live stream on YouTube.
It was around 10 till 6 last night. We heard unconfirmed reports of FBI movement into the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Harney County. We heard these reports were being broadcasted by Gavin Symes on YouTube. You can hear occupiers David Fry and Sean Anderson saying FBI vehicles are moving in. Soon after, at 6:18, the FBI movement was confirmed. In the press release we received from the FBI, they say at approximately 4:30 p.m., one of the occupiers rode an ATV outside of the established barricades at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. At 11:40 last night, we learned Cliven Bundy, the father of occupier Ammon Bundy, was arrested. This morning, the live feed continued as news outlets all over Oregon took to social media. We were told the occupiers were expected to surrender at 8 a.m., but at 9, the live stream was still going. At that point, Michelle Fiore, an assemblywoman from Nevada, all 4 of the occupiers, Reverend Franklin Graham and Gavin Symes, were on the live stream.
Okay, so right now, they're telling everybody to come out one at a time.
At 9:40, the FBI brought 3 of the remaining occupiers into custody, one at a time, without incident. At 9:50 this morning, Cliven Bundy was charged with assault and conspiracy. One occupier, David Fry, refused to come out, saying,
"Unless my grievances are heard, I will not come out. It's liberty or death. I will not go another day a slave to this system. I'm a free man. I will die a free man."
Around 10:50, we heard the live feed go partially silent as Fry spoke with FBI agents saying he wouldn't cooperate unless they all said hallelujah.
You're saying hallelujah.
You then hear FBI agents ask Fry to keep his hands raised and then put them behind his back.
Put your hands behind your back. Okay? All right. All right, folks. Everybody come on.
Harney County released a statement officially announcing the end of the occupation around noon, and a press conference was held this afternoon at 2 p.m.
By 11 this morning, all 4 of the occupiers had been taken into custody. Now those occupiers include Sean Larry Anderson, Sandra Lynn Anderson, Jeff Wayne Banta, and David Lee Fry. And of course, we will keep you up to date with the latest information as we continue our team coverage. Dan?
Danny Free joining us in studio. Thanks.
That's when state troopers shot and killed the group's spokesman, LaVoy Finicum. The armed occupiers took over the National Wildlife Refuge nearly 6 weeks ago. They're protesting the imprisonment of 2 Oregon ranchers and federal land ownership. Today, 16 protesters are facing felony charges, federal charges, and at this point, it's unclear when those occupiers still in jail could be released pending trial.
Well, after the news spread that this whole thing came to a peaceful end, Oregon Governor Kate Brown took a moment to thank law enforcement.
So it is with great relief and gratitude to the work of our FBI, our federal authorities, our Oregon State Police, and our local Sheriff's Association.
Oregon Senator Ron Wyden issued a statement as well. It says, in part, the steady resolve of the Burns community and Harney County leaders have kept this sad episode from sparking something much worse.
And Representative Greg Walden, who represents the people of Harney County, says, quote, "We can all be grateful that today has ended peacefully and that this situation is finally over. Now life in Harney County can begin to return to normal and the community can begin the long process of healing."
Stay with KGW for continuing coverage on this story today. We will be attending Cliven Bundy's court hearing getting underway in the next hour. We'll bring you updates on air and online at kgw.com, also on our Facebook and Twitter feeds.
On day 41, the armed occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge is officially over. Good evening and welcome to News Channel 21. I'm Dan McCarthy. Our own Wanda Moore was first on scene when this all began, and she was on site when it ended this morning. She joins us now live with the latest. Wanda?
Well, Dan, around 11 a.m. today, the last remaining occupier, David Fry, officially surrendered, and with it, he ended this month-long occupation. Now, this all comes after tense and emotional negotiations over the phone, which were broadcasted live on YouTube. Now, the 4 remaining occupiers had agreed the night before they would surrender at 8 a.m., but only with the Nevada Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore and Reverend Franklin Graham present. 8 a.m. came and went, and there was still no sign of Fiore or the occupiers. Hours later, 3 of the 4 occupiers went out of the refuge, hands in the air. Aside from Fry, who said on the phone that he would not come out until his grievances were met, Fry was getting more frantic, talking about shooting himself, that he didn't want to live anymore. He then talked about UFOs, aliens, and mentioned again and again that he is against abortion. Eventually, he agreed to surrender, but his demand was to be able to eat a cookie first and then have the FBI say hallelujah as he walks out. They did, and they're not the only ones, as Burns residents are breathing a sigh of relief that this is finally over.
I just posted hallelujah on my Facebook post, and I think that says it all.
The FBI will now transport them to Portland, where they will be charged, as well as 9 other occupiers who are now facing charges, bringing the total to 25. Now, Cliven Bundy was arrested last night in Portland on federal conspiracy charges for his role in the 2014 Nevada standoff. Now, the occupation is over, but the battle in the courts, well, they're just starting right now. And now I'm going to turn to Kendra Kent, who spoke with residents here in Harney County, and tell me a little bit about what they're feeling right now.
Well, they're saying finally, finally this is all over. It's a chance for them now to begin that healing process and maybe go back to a normal community where there aren't police everywhere and media everywhere. So there's that sense, and then there's also the sense that they're so glad that this time around it did end peacefully and nobody was hurt. But even the phrase "it's over" is being used a lot. There's still a lot of caution here in Burns. Now, I sat down with County Judge Steve Grasty, who told me he doesn't feel like his community is entirely safe. He worries occupier supporters could still come into Burns. Now, speaking on the surrender specifically, Grasty says he quote, feels sorry for David Fry and grateful that he did not commit suicide. He did give credit to Nevada Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore for helping Fry to finally give up. And I did ask Grasty what was going through his mind when he realized it was indeed all over.
Relief. I've talked to a lot of people, and that's the word I hear over and over. Just relieved that we're through, and now how do we move ahead?
And for Grasty, one of the next steps is trying to be reimbursed for some of the money that his county has spent. He's told me that so far it's definitely well over $230,000, but that's only through January. He thinks by the time this is all over, it could cost Harney County about $500,000. He says that is a lot of money for a small community. And of course, we did speak with other people in the community who went to the press conference today, and I'm going to have some of their reaction coming up here in just a little bit. Dan, I'll send it back to you.
That is Kendra Kent, joined by Wanda Moore in Harney County. Now,
I tell you guys, there toward the end, there's something in the last 10 minutes that told me that David Fry was doing nothing more than messing with the FBI. You know, when he went into his tent. So I was happy that he got his hallelujah out of them. The whole pizza thing, all he wanted was his weed
and his pizza.
And
to have them say hallelujah.
And one last cigarette, one last cookie.
One last cigarette, one last cookie. That's a T-shirt right there.
So I think Gavin gave him the platform to speak his grievances. He really, I think, in the end felt in his soul that people cared about him, that he had finally got to say, what he needed to say. And we're happy that, you know, it all came out in the end with no one hurt.
Right? No further fatalities. He was in a dark place. They all were.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Pete Santilli with a very important update on this 10th day of February, the year of our Lord 2016. to all other Americans that if you speak up about the government, if you're critical in any way, shape, or form, that we will throw you in jail and consider your words to be dangerous. Certainly a violation of the First Amendment, and it reverberates throughout the country, believe it or not. The ACLU organization out of Oregon has stepped up recognizing that my case cannot be allowed to stand because of the potential of stifling every American's constitutionally protected freedoms of speech. Second, I want to give special recognition and credence, and I'm telling you, I've loved him ever since I started working with him years ago, having him on the show, Mr. John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute, who's overseeing my case. He is my attorney and has been. He's America's attorney, America's constitutional attorney. Ammon was one of the few who knew the difference between right and wrong and constitutionality, and he stood up. And he stood up loud and proud. And to this day, Gavin has never stood down. In fact, he stood tall in leading all of us in a telephone campaign to get all of the patriots here in the Multnomah County Detention Center out of solitary confinement. Here's the great news. We, the people, can make a difference. I'm going to tell you that right now. As a result of that campaign, when people found out that we have been secluded in solitary confinement for 23 hours per day for over 2 weeks now, people came together. They were outraged. Gavin put together a call campaign and immediately had all of us move to a more humane section of the jail. I'm pleased to announce that I'm now in thanks to Gavin Sime's leadership, but more importantly, thanks to those who joined the campaign, we the people got things done, and I'm now in a new area of the jail, and not in solitary confinement. I actually have 4 hours of release per day. But I want to let you all know that Gavin is one person that I want you to follow closely, especially in the coming days, because that's just one instance of things that we can do.
There are people there on the ground right now that are in Portland, Oregon, because we haven't even left the room yet due to the events of today and this broadcast. But there are people on the ground telling me that the news media is there. Clive Bundy is there. Patriots, rise, And you know what? It's not just patriots. All Americans that wish to voice themselves for all grievances that this nation has caused all of us. It is time for us all to put our differences aside of opinions or cultural differences, all of those things, and unite together.
Dan McCarthy. On day 41, the armed occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge is officially over. Our own Wanda Moore was on scene when this all began, and she was on site when it ended this morning. She has the latest.
On day 41, the armed occupation is officially over, and this is how close media was able to get. You can see the refuge around 6 miles away from us, where the final hours of the occupation happened. As the last sun rises on the occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, media crews are waiting for the surrender of the last 4 occupiers. For hours, no movement in and out of the refuge. The set surrender time of 8 a.m. comes and goes. Still no sign of Nevada Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore or Reverend Franklin Graham. Both were requested to be present by the occupiers. Supporters of the militia pull up at the roadblock, waving large American flags and carrying signs. But there are also those opposing the group and what the occupation has done to Harney County.
Can tear up a community in a way that I didn't think I could ever see, and that is exactly what has happened here.
Then suddenly, car after car were speeding past the roadblock towards the refuge. As Fiore and Graham were on their way to negotiate with the occupiers, a group of elected officials from Nevada and Idaho addressed the media.
If I have a Nevada resident that is in peril, if there's a risk of life or bloodshed, I will travel to the ends of the earth.
Also on scene, Ammon Bundy's lawyer, who says Bundy is happy with the outcome.
Yeah, Ammon, he wanted a peaceful resolution, and he did a call for action. Michelle answered that call, and I was just kind of the passive observer and chauffeur on this road trip.
Shortly after, 3 of the 4 occupiers surrender, but David Fry refuses to come out, talking about shooting himself. After a tense hour, he agreed to surrender, but only if the SWAT team was yelling hallelujah. And as the occupation is ending after over a month, that sentiment is shared by Harney County residents.
I just posted hallelujah on my Facebook post, and I think that says it all.
In Burns, Wanda Moore, News Channel.
Okay. I'm Representative Heather Scott, District 1A, North Idaho.
I'm Michelle Fiore, Assemblywoman from Las Vegas, Nevada, District 4.
I'm Representative Judy Boyle from District 9 in Idaho.
I'm Shelley Shelton, Assemblywoman in Las Vegas, Nevada.
I'm John Moore, Assemblyman from District 8 in Las Vegas, Nevada.
What brings all of you together today?
The Coalition of Western States.
There's a lot of us not here, I must say. There's a lot of us not here today. We have reps in Arizona and reps in Utah and Wyoming. Washington. Actually, our director, Matt Shea, who's been on the phone with us through this whole thing, and one of our reps, Kelly Townsend, in Arizona. I mean, we have a huge participation with legislators, sitting elected officials, which are part of the Coalition of Western States.
And what is your mission statement?
We're a coalition of legislators and elected officials, and actually some pastors and clergy that are against federal overreach and tyranny.
And that brings you to Eastern Oregon.
Basically for a safe exit for Americans that were here.
We've been involved in this since day one, in parts of the negotiation. One of our members was the negotiator that got the larger group out earlier, and this star here finished the job.
And how did you get involved? Did you all have constituents that were here?
Yes, from each of our states we had folks that were here, and again, there's a lot of other reps that aren't here, that were here in spirit on the phone through technology.
And prayers.
And lots of prayers. Lots of prayers.
And we're just very pleased it ended peacefully.
Yes. Yes.
Can you tell us anything else about how everything went?
Yes. Everything went well when the Reverend Franklin Graham and I went up there and we negotiated the 4 out with the FBI. Sandra and Sean and Jeff all made great statements on how well they were treated, and they let us hug them, and they let us out of the car, and you know, it's when they had their handcuffs in the front of them, so if their hands were like this, so like when Sandy came to hug me, she went like this, you know. So it was just really cool, and now so it starts our chapter 2. So now we've got to run off. We've got to go to Portland because we've got to get together with all these attorneys. And now, like we said from the beginning, Cal is just, you know, we took it from the refuge to a new battleground.
Did everything go as you expected or hoped?
Everything went just as I planned.
Well, that's good news.
Yes. Safe and sound. Yeah. Planned and prayed. Yeah.
Prayer is amazing.
Yeah. Can you tell us anything about Chapter 2?
Chapter 2 is going to be fought in the courts. Right now, I have to tell you, Michael Arnold, who's Ammon Bundy's attorney, has been with me since I arrived on the ground in Portland, Oregon. And I have to tell, I just want to introduce Mike Arnold here for a second and have him say a few words, because I think he could really let you know how it all unfolded, because he got me and knew it was unfolding.
Hello.
Hi. I was just pretty much the chauffeur for Michelle. She did a great job, and I was glad to.
Well, we heard you on that call too. We were all listening, and we appreciated everything you were doing.
As you can probably realize, sometimes it's hard to shut a lawyer up, so I do apologize for interrupting.
Well, I thank you guys so much and getting the word out. And this was a community effort from the folks that were at the refuge, from Ammon Bundy sending a message out, from us going up there, from the Reverend Franklin Graham, which was the first time I got to meet him in person, and he's just as majestic in person as he is on TV, and for all of us that participated in it. Thank you.
And can I just say one thing about this entire civil disobedience, the civil protest? I've been hearing people in this diner talk about Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution, And I honestly hadn't thought about that ever in my life, and I just find it fascinating that civil disobedience can create civil dialogue, and I'm impressed that Ammon and them stuck their neck out to try to do that. It was impressive, and I'm interested to see what the next step is in phase 2.
So the big message is to let everybody get a copy of the Constitution and learn it.
Yes, absolutely.
You have God-given rights, and you need to exercise those rights so we don't lose those rights. We need to protect them. They're sacred rights.
Well, I think as constituents, we're all lucky to have all of you on our side.
Thank you.
With you today. The Malheur National Wildlife Refuge remains closed and will remain closed for a period of several weeks. This will help us to be able to complete the work we have to do. Most immediately, FBI agents are performing a clearing of the buildings and surrounding areas of the refuge to ensure that everybody has been has left and that there's no one remaining on the refuge. This process will take a period of several hours. Following that, a tactical clearing of the refuge by a team of FBI Special Agent bomb technicians and by representatives from the Oregon State Police Explosives and Arson Unit, as well as Portland Police Bureau technicians and technicians from the Oregon Air National Guard will participate in this clearing. They will methodically work their way through the refuge, clearing the property of explosives and other related hazards. This process also will take 1 to 2 days. Once the refuge has been cleared of hazards, the FBI's evidence response teams will enter the refuge and will begin to document and collect evidence as it relates to potential crimes that were committed by the occupiers while they were on the refuge. In addition, FBI forensic examiners from the Northwest Regional Computer Forensics Lab will work on the refuge to recover computer and electronic devices. It will likely take several weeks for them to be able to process all the evidence, and then several months for them to analyze that evidence. At the same time, the FBI is deploying experts with its art crime team to work on the refuge. These agents are specially trained in cultural property investigations. They will be responsible for working with members of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as the Burns Paiute tribe, to identify and document damage to the tribe's artifacts and sacred burial grounds. They will start with an archaeological field assessment to determine any potential violations of the Native American Graves and Repatriation Protection Act and the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. This work as well will take several weeks. As the FBI works through each of these investigative processes, we will consult with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to determine the best time and the soonest time possible that we can return the refuge back to that agency. Let me share with you just a few closing thoughts. Over the course of the last month, the people of Harney County have lived through an experience that is both emotionally exhausting and physically trying. We've seen the occupiers and their outside supporters attempt to drive deep divisions within and between the citizens of this community. We have seen some residents leave their homes fearing for their safety. We have seen the confusion, concern, and trouble that the occupiers' actions have caused members of this community. This series of events has been beyond difficult for the families of Harney County. But I have to tell you, in the time I've been here, I've also witnessed the love that exists in this community between the residents here, the concern they feel for the community, the concern they feel for this land that surrounds the town of Burns and Hines, and also for the way of life that makes this community so special. This passion for everything good about Harney County is what will help this community heal. This is your community, and the FBI and all the other law enforcement agencies that have participated in this event to date are honored that we're able to be of service to you, to your community, to help bring back some normalcy to this area. I have to reiterate, we still have a lot of work to do, and we continue to ask for your patience as we complete the tasks that I've described to you today. We will do everything we can to return the refuge back to the citizens of this county and to the people who work there and to all the people who travel here to visit that refuge as soon as possible. In particular, we know that the people of the Burns Paiute tribe have specific concerns about the potential desecration of their ancestral lands and artifacts dating back thousands of years. As we complete the necessary safety checks and process the crime scene, we will work with tribal representatives to ensure that our work remains sensitive to their historical and cultural concerns. In closing, I want to make sure I take this opportunity to thank Harney County Sheriff Dave Ward. I've never met a man who cares as much for this community in which he lives and for the citizens that live here. He has tried from the beginning of this event to bring a peaceful resolution, and he has worked hard with every member of this community, with all the law enforcement agencies that have been here working, and with the various other pressures that come when these kind of events. And he has remained true to his word. He wanted to make sure that the citizens here in this county were heard, that their concerns were had an outlet, and that at the end of the day, we brought this to a peaceful and successful conclusion. I'm grateful that we're able to now work as hard as we can to return this community back to normalcy and return it back to the way it was before these events took place. Thank you very much. We'll hear now from Harney County Judge Steve Grasty and then the sheriff, after which I'll take a few questions.
So good afternoon, and it is a good afternoon. I have to echo what was just said about our sheriff. I'm amazed with his calm, cool demeanor throughout this entire event. He really did a lot to lead the peaceful outcome that we ended up with this morning. I'm also proud to represent the Harney County Court as your elected officials, the elected officials of this county, and with this statement. The occupation at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge is over. Law enforcement will now be able to begin the process of clearing buildings, as you just heard, and processing the crime scene. But let's be clear. Armed occupation of federal property is a crime and is not a peaceful protest. And the illegal taking of federal property is a matter rightly dealt with by the FBI. There are underlying issues that still need to be addressed. Management of federal lands is one that we've been working on for years and will continue to work on. Harney County's made some positive steps over the years, moving forward with collaborative processes, but we got a long ways to go. In the meantime, the occupation and continued presence of militia groups in Harney County continues to raise division in the county and with every community within this county. Calls for thousands of people to descend on Burns are very troubling. Continued militia presence in Harney County will only serve to delay any further or meaningful work on the issues that truly need to be addressed. We are grateful that the occupation ended peacefully, and we look forward to the day when our community is ours once again.
Good afternoon. I'm Sheriff Dave Ward. Apologize. I've been feeling a little emotional today. I'm proud of this community. I'm proud of my friends and neighbors. I'm proud of the way that you stood up to this stuff. I love this country. And a house divided against itself cannot stand. I've seen division in our community, division in families, division amongst friends and neighbors, and divisions in our church congregations. Apologize. There's good that can come out of this. You know, friends and neighbors can get off social media and sit down over a cup of coffee and talk out their differences. we can work through these things. There's been a lot of hurt. There's been a lot of things said. But I don't think there's anything that's been done that can't be worked through. And if we can't work through the differences that we've found in our little community right here, how can we expect the rest of the nation to work through the division that we face? Our government's run by people. Human beings are an imperfect being. I make mistakes in my job every day. I sit down at the end of the day and I try to think about what I could have done different. We need to communicate with our leaders, and our leaders need to communicate with us. I've seen people angry. I've seen people angry that couldn't explain what they were even angry about. And it's torn our community apart. I see it tearing our country apart. But right now we have the opportunity as people in this great nation, the best nation on the face of the earth, to come out and work through our differences and start getting things back together. I was amazed today when I was listening to a live feed. I'm sure a lot of people heard it. Young man, very troubled young man, said, if everybody says hallelujah, I'll come out. I heard hallelujahs from a SWAT team. I heard hallelujahs in unison out of an entire building of people that were watching that with their fingers crossed, hoping to God that they could get people out alive. I'm so proud of all the people who came here, every agency that worked together to work towards the most peaceful resolution that they could find in this situation. And unfortunately, there was life lost through the course of this, but I still believe that they found the most peaceful resolution they could. And I'm proud of every single person that came out. I'll say it again, I love this community and I'm proud of every person in it. And I want to sit down and work out differences between myself and my neighbors, and I would encourage everybody in this community and in this country to do the same. We can't continue to go on tearing each other apart, hating each other because of differences of opinions. We can't go on like that. There's a reason that people risk their lives to come to our country every day from around the world, and that's because it's a fine place to live. So if I could encourage my friends and neighbors to get off of Facebook and talk to each other in person, if I could encourage them, if they had a complaint with a civil servant, to sit down and write a well thought out letter void of profanity and insults, I think that we could get a lot farther. And if you're so persuaded, turn off the computer and get on your knees and pray for your leadership, because there's no way we're going to fix this country if we're all mad at each other and fighting over everything. So God bless you all, and thank you.
All right, we can take a few questions now.
Do you think you could have talked them out peacefully on your own without these third-party negotiators who seem to make all the difference?
Negotiations with these individuals have been going on for a period of many, many days into weeks. And we've employed both trained crisis negotiators and third-party intermediaries. And it was a combination of all who were able to talk them off coming off the refuge.
How did it all come together today? What were the circumstances that made it happen today?
Well, as I described last night, we felt it was time to, both for the safety of those who were on the refuge and the safety of the officers who were involved in the event, to up the pressure that we were applying to those who were at the refuge. And in conjunction with that, we had a concerted effort to work through crisis negotiators, again, intermediaries such as the Reverend Franklin Graham. Though he was here today, he spent well over a week speaking to those on the refuge and helping them work through their issues so they could come to a point where they are ready to leave of their own volition.
Who was the one that eventually got Fry out
It was a team effort, but I
Who had the last word,
I can't say enough about specifically the Reverend Franklin Graham, excuse me, and also there was significant assistance provided by Michelle Fiore.
Can you describe Mr. Fry's surrender? Just describe sort of what happened.
Well, as many of you in this room know, he was live streaming, and he was in a very emotional state. I've got to believe that at a certain point, he was able to look around, notice he was there by himself, and that it would probably behoove him to remove himself from that situation.
Have you ever seen anything like this with a standoff that plays out on YouTube? Have you ever seen anything like this with a standoff that plays out on YouTube and streaming live and so much access to what's
You know,
going on?
that's, believe it or not, that's something we've discussed quite frequently over there in the junior high school amongst us here in law enforcement. You know, law enforcement is continually changing, as is the social media environment, technology, and yes, we've had instances like this in the past, and we'll have likely many more like this in the future, and it's something that we'll continue to work through and revise our techniques so that we can use them to our advantage as well to help bring these things.
You said you'd have bomb squads go through every building. Do you have any indication that there are actually explosives set, or is that a precaution, a safety issue?
You know, there are several things that have happened over the last 41 days that have led us to believe that this is a prudent thing for us to do.
Can you give me any details on that?
No.
After Fry appeared to be suicidal, was there a psych evaluation done after he was detained?
You know, there'll be several steps that'll happen over the next several weeks, all of which, you know, will happen outside of the FBI's purview.
Were all four taken back to Portland, and when do you expect them to be in front of the federal government?
They were all transported back to Portland, where they'll receive an initial appearance, likely tomorrow, before a judge.
There's been a lot of questions asked about body cam video from the traffic stop where LaVoy Finicum was killed. Can you comment on that?
I can tell you that the video that we had was provided, and that's about all I can tell you. There was no actual video of the individuals on the persons of the tactical operators.
Is that a normal thing?
You know what? I'll have to leave that question to the Oregon State Police.
Can you touch on the circumstances and timing of Clive Bundy's arrest?
I can only tell you that last night, agents from the FBI Portland Division arrested Clive Bundy at the Portland International Airport and arrested him without incident. The charges stemmed from charges that came out of the District of Nevada. He did have an initial appearance today at 1:30, and he will make his way back to the District of Nevada.
What was it about the ATV incident that sparked all of this?
You know, there's a lot of things that happened during the last several hours yesterday, and one of them was that an individual rode his ATV outside of their perimeter. They've set up several roadblocks with government trucks and front-end loaders, etc. And while he was out there, he observed some agents and made it back to his compound, and that's when we...
Did he say what he was doing? Why he was going out?
No, we haven't had a chance to interview about anything like that.
You said the intermediaries.
Yes.
Go ahead. That happened more than once? The individual leaving the perimeter the day before as well as yesterday?
No, I can tell you that the distance and location where he traveled was the first time.
You said the intermediaries were helpful, but I wonder, you know, there were tens of thousands of people listening to the live stream, and on that live stream, Michelle Fiore was really sort of pumping these guys up, really giving them sort of the hero's treatment about what they were doing. They're calling them patriots repeatedly and whatnot. I don't know how much of that were tactics, was a tactical operation on her part, and how much of it she really believed all of that. But any concern with all of this lionizing of the occupiers done by the legislators who were there, both Michelle Fiore and the two legislators from Idaho and elsewhere who were calling these people patriots? Any concern that all of that praise for them would inspire copycats around the country?
You know,
the same thing?
without speaking specifically about anything Fiore or anybody else might have said, I can say this. Illegal acts such as occupying federal property in a violent manner, armed, to deprive employees or citizens access to those facilities will not be tolerated in the United States. And I hope that message has gotten out clearly, that that kind of activity has consequences, and those consequences will be visited upon those people who carry out those activities.
Can you talk about the charges filed against Clive and Bundy? When were they drawn up, and why it took so long to...
You know, I would refer all questions about Clive and Bundy to the District of Nevada.
Can you describe the current condition of the refuge?
There's work to be done on the refuge. There's a significant amount of cleanup that'll have to happen after we process the crime scene, and I think there'll actually be an opportunity at some point where that'll become evident to people.
David Fry had said repeatedly that cell service was cut off and internet. So how was he able to keep posting these videos? And were you aware of them? And were you allowing it?
Oh, we were very aware of it, and most people in the United States were very aware of it. Honestly, I won't get into what we did and didn't allow. There obviously has to be some way to communicate with individuals who are in that type of situation.
So how was he able to upload those videos?
You know, we're not going to get into all that at this point.